I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, the coming hot and humid weather is causing concern for families with loved ones in some GTA long-term care homes without in-room air conditioning.
That the cooling is in the common areas only. The common areas are the cafeteria and the one common TV room at the beginning of the corridor.
With the GTA set for days of hot weather, the situation is taking on added urgency. Plus, more people in Ontario are now able to book their second shot of vaccine. We'll give you details on the expanded eligibility. And
now that the case counts have come back down, public health units do have the capacity to do that again.
To prevent future outbreaks and widespread lockdowns, we are looking at why public health officials will need to step up their COVID-19 contact tracing. The hot and humid weather we're expecting over the next few days is causing concern tonight for some GTA families with loved ones in long-term care. Some homes still lack in-room air conditioning, and to make matters worse, COVID-19 outbreaks mean in some cases, residents can't even go outdoors. Loretta Redekop with our top story.
Nick Popolo says his mother now has a fan in her room.
We're going to monitor the temperatures this weekend to see if it does anything.
He's been raising issues with the sweltering temperature at her home for a year. The home's owner, Sienna, says Woodbridge Vista was built with a full cooling system. However, some units were not designed to manage the consistent heat and humidity we have experienced in recent summers. Another issue, the home is in outbreak due to cases among staff.
We can bring her outside if the home is not in lockdown, which they still are in lockdown. We can remove her from the home, but then putting her back into the home is very, very difficult. So we're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
He's also head of the home's family council and says he hears from families at other homes also without in-room air conditioning.
I got to thank the reporter from CBC for bringing this to the attention. What a great job she did. We acted on it immediately.
Yesterday in question period, the Premier again brought up his government's work on changing air conditioning requirements, a response to Popolo first telling his story, making cooling areas mandatory in homes.
I am confident that we're going to hit the 100% to have cooling in every single room. We get updated every single week, and we aren't going to stop until we get 100%.
But it's not clear when that might happen.
In fairness, they've moved air conditioning forward.
She credits the government, but says tens of thousands of long-term care residents still won't have AC in their rooms this summer, in some cases due to old buildings at standards from 1972. Many residents can't get to a cooling space on their own, and staffing levels are down.
If it's a very hot summer, then people's lives really are at risk. Those people that are left in those rooms without enough staff to help them, without the hydration carts going around because the staffing shortages are so terrible. Many are more isolated in their rooms than they have ever been in my 20 years of experience in dealing with long-term care.
As for Woodbridge Vista, Sienna says they're working on a new air conditioning system, and we are providing temporary cooling measures to each of the resident rooms, meaning fans like Popolo's mom now has. Loretta Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
It is starting to feel like summer. Environment Canada has issued a heat warning for Toronto and the GTA. Nally Kalata takes a look at how you can stay cool.
Cue the heat. It's not summer yet, but it sure feels like it, and it's about to get even hotter.
It's definitely above seasonal. This weekend especially, we're seeing temperatures that are about 5 to 10 degrees above normal.
This weekend, with forecast highs in the mid-30s, Environment Canada has issued a heat warning.
With the sun and the temperatures as strong as they're going to be, it's important for people to take as many breaks as they can. Avoid strenuous activity as much as possible. Drink plenty of water. It's important to replenish those fluids, especially before you start to feel thirsty.
Starting at 11 a.m., the City of Toronto is opening its emergency cooling centers with COVID protocols in place. Pandemic restrictions means malls won't be open. But for the first time this year, Toronto's beaches will be.
Lifeguards will be on duty at swimming areas starting at 10:30 tomorrow morning. So the beach is a good option as well from a cooling center.
And with a rush of people expected to flood the waterfront, bylaw officers and police will be on hand to remind all of COVID restrictions and protocols.
while people are getting vaccinated at tremendous rates, more than 70% of adults in Toronto have received at least one dose of vaccine. That's good, but we still need to remember that physical distancing and mask wearing and not gathering with more than 5 people is still required under provincial orders.
Those orders mean pools will stay closed this weekend. They're on the list for step 1 of reopening, which is expected to happen in the next couple of weeks. Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, Colette, finish the lyric. Me mind on fire, me soul on fire, feeling.
Hot, hot, hot.
I knew you wouldn't let me down.
Ole, ole. I mean, are we going to keep going? How you feeling? I wouldn't let you down. Yes, we know that there is going to be this heat coming, and we're talking about it. And we've been knowing, you know, we've had warning this was going to be showing up, but the heat warnings now issued from Environment Canada, as you heard in Natalie Collada's piece. But I just want to show you that where they've been issued for Halton Peel, York Durham, City of Toronto, through these regions, it's not like anywhere else. You're not also going to be having the same conditions. So these may be expanded, but just know we need to take it easy and make sure we have lots of water, no matter where you happen to be in southern and eastern Ontario. We're all going to be feeling this heat. In fact, it even goes beyond those areas. The Humidex values, I've been talking about how they're going to be approaching 40, especially by the second half of the weekend and into Monday, but you're even going to be feeling it tomorrow. You know, they say that between 30 and 39, there's some discomfort. I almost feel there should be an extra category 35 to 39, because really it's not just some for many folks, and especially the very young or older, or if you have any kind of respiratory issues. But certainly we are going to be approaching that great discomfort area and that area where we do need to avoid exertion. A few pop-ups with some of that humidity there. You can see some of the lightning strikes over towards eastern Ontario. Those are moving off now, but you're still experiencing some of this towards the northeast of the city. And overnight tonight, we'll see things drying out, not the way the air feels, but in terms of those pop-ups are dissipating. 20 degrees, tomorrow 32. If we get there, that will be a new record. The record for tomorrow, Dwight, is 30. That was set back in 1940. So it's been long-standing, and I think we're going to take a good run at breaking that.
Certainly feels that way. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
This weather update is brought to you by Train. For a limited time, take advantage of 36 equal payments and 0% financing. It's hard to stop a train.
The province is accelerating the rollout of the second dose of vaccine starting next week. Those 70 and over, and anyone who got an mRNA vaccine before April 18th can start booking their second shot. Kirathanis Sasatharan now with the details.
The push was on to get needles and arms in Scarborough today. Vaccination teams partnered with local businesses to bring vaccines right to people in the community in an effort called Dash for Doses.
I think it's a great way to give back to the local community as well, to be a spot for people to get vaccinated, as well as a great opportunity to get the staff who's not yet been vaccinated the opportunity to get it done right at work.
Scarborough Health Network went out with 400 doses in an effort to help vaccinate people with their first shot, making stops at Lowe's, Adonis, and Golden Mile Plaza. While the push continues to get people their first doses, the Ontario government announcing today anyone over 70 and those who received their mRNA vaccines before April 18th can now book their second doses of the vaccine starting June 7th. If you got your first dose of AstraZeneca more than 12 weeks ago, you can also now book an appointment for an mRNA vaccine as your second dose, bringing Ontarians one step closer to a 2-dose summer.
There aren't words to describe how I feel. Because
for Elaine Pavlov, tomorrow is going to be an exciting day. She booked her second dose when York Region dropped the eligibility to 70 plus earlier this week.
I'm beside myself. I'm going to start to cry. I have grandchildren. I have a daughter. We haven't been able to see each other. I've been locked in my apartment for a year and a half. I'm so excited to be able to get it done.
Pavlov booked her appointment with the help of Shonda Sundaresan, but other seniors she works with haven't been so eager.
I have spoken to a few people that I had booked the first time round to say, listen, I'm going to help get your second appointment. And they said, you know, we'd just like to wait a while. We're not comfortable.
Dr. Nathan Stahl says complications around booking, being homebound, or not being tech savvy can be barriers. He says targeted strategies are needed to see a second dose uptake.
We know that vaccine hotspot strategy ended a couple weeks ago. We need to now reboot that strategy get second doses into the arms, particularly in people who live in hotspots where there's a high circulating amount of that Delta variant.
The City of Toronto has announced they've opened 10,000 appointments at city clinics next week. Kirtan Asasi there on CBC News, Toronto.
A new deal between the federal government and Pfizer will see millions more doses of vaccine heading to Canada later this year. Ottawa announcing today it has negotiated an option with the mRNA vaccine maker for an extra 3 million doses. The delivery will happen in September. The Prime Minister says the government remains on track to meet its target of inoculating everyone who wants the vaccine by the end of September. As the province pushes forward with plans to start reopening, some health experts are stressing the need for a better system of contact tracing, something that fell by the wayside during the third wave of the pandemic when case counts hit their peak. Greg Ross has more.
There's still a substantial portion of susceptible individuals, and we don't want the disease to be just circulating in an uncontrolled way.
Irfan Dalla with Unity Health Toronto says contact tracing is needed for every positive case, which begs the question, why now and not a few months ago when COVID-19 cases were reaching record levels?
I think we stopped because public health units simply didn't have the capacity to keep up with case and contact management when we were having several thousand cases a day in Ontario. Now that the case counts have come back down, public health units do have the capacity to do that again.
Dalla says it's just as important now as it was when cases were higher, but now it all centers around the province's plans to start reopening.
As we reopen, most of us will start to have more and more contacts. And if we are unvaccinated, or even if we have only had one dose, the virus then has some opportunity to transmit. And so as that happens, we need to make sure that we are following the chains of transmission.
He says even as the number of fully vaccinated Ontarians continues to rise, there will still be a need for contact tracing.
We could get to vaccination levels of 75%. And if the virus is still circulating wildly amongst the remaining 25% of the population, we might not overwhelm the healthcare system, but we'll still have a lot of people becoming sick every day and a fair number of people dying every day.
Dalla says it's also key to ensure that COVID-19 testing is easy and accessible to everyone. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
The Premier's office releasing a statement this afternoon saying he's disappointed to hear some school boards are passing on the opportunity to hold in-person graduation ceremonies. It comes after Toronto's public and Catholic boards said doing so just isn't feasible.
There have already been costs incurred, as well as Toronto Public Health guidance that we have had for months now about the importance of virtual ceremonies and virtual events given the current circumstances.
The board says there just isn't enough time to plan the ceremonies. The Toronto Catholic Board says it will also stick with virtual events. The TDSB saying it was concerned some students would get an in-person ceremony while others wouldn't. The Premier raised the possibility of doing in-person graduations earlier this week. TDSB adding it will try to offer students an opportunity to meet with friends and staff before the end of the school year. The Ontario Legislature has relocated a painting and bust of Egerton Ryerson following a request from Ontario's Leader of the Opposition. NDP leader Andrea Horwath's office wrote to the legislative speaker requesting to move the artwork, which was displayed outside her office. The request was made after the remains of 215 children were discovered last week at a former residential school in Kamloops, BC. Since then, calls have been growing to remove the statue of Egerton Ryerson, who was one of the architects of Canada's residential school system. Pressure has also been mounting for the school to change its name. And there are increasing calls within Canada and internationally to investigate possible burial sites at residential schools right across the country. At the same time, the federal government is increasing its calls for a formal apology from the Roman Catholic Church. Olivia Stefanovic now with the latest on that.
As a Catholic, I am deeply disappointed by the position that the Catholic Church has taken.
Stark words from the Prime Minister, adding pressure on the Vatican to take responsibility for its role in the residential school era.
I think it's going to be a really important moment for all of us, particularly Catholics across the country, to reach out in our local parishes, to reach out to bishops and cardinals, and make it clear that we expect the church to take up and step up.
The Catholic Church ran more than half of the schools, but it's the only one that has not made a formal apology.
We wanted the Pope to come to Canada.
The national chief of the Assembly of First Nations wants the church to say sorry and hand over all its records.
An independent investigation is required.
But Perry Bellegarde also wants to see Ottawa launch an inquiry into all residential school sites to determine how many more burials there may be.
I hope that every Canadian now understands their role in decolonizing, in healing.
So far, the federal government is not making any commitments.
The nations and communities involved have to be at the forefront of this, and they will tell us what to do.
But the Prime Minister did say his government is open to international participation. Experts at the United Nations are calling for a probe into the deaths and disappearances of Indigenous children from residential schools. There are also demands for the International Criminal Court to take a look into the matter. This as people across the country continue to gather at memorials like this one at Parliament Hill for those who died at residential schools. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
A northern community is grieving in solidarity following the report of remains found at the former residential school in BC. The town of Fort Resolution was the site of one of the first residential schools in the Northwest Territories, and for years, residents have worried there may be unmarked graves in their community. Juanita Taylor has the story.
Wilfred Simon thinks a lot about the children who never made it home from residential school.
I get so emotional just thinking of kids that stuck there from their parents and, taken away, and they're probably so lost, probably so hurt, and then they die, in the arms of, they probably don't even know who. All in this area.
Simon went to residential school. He fears there are unmarked graves here in the cemetery and in town. This community was once the site of St. Joseph's Residential School. 13 years ago, he called for an investigation to find out how many children died and who they were, but nothing was done.
They think that we're going against the Catholic Church, or we're not going against any church.
This is the site where St. Joseph's Residential School once stood. Children from across the Northwest Territories and beyond were taken from their families and sent here. But fires, shortages of food, and illnesses closed its doors in 1957. That's when the children were moved to another residential school in Fort Smith. Today, that legacy is on the minds of many people in Fort Resolution.
And he talked about children being buried in the yard here, too.
Lainey Bolio's great-grandfather went to St. Joseph's Residential School. She would like to see that site searched.
Yeah. I would love if we could use those machines here to do the same thing they did in Kamloops. I feel like it would be kind of a good sense of closure.
The chief of the Deninukway First Nation agrees.
I'm not sure if that really happened here. It'll be something that could be investigated, and we should push for it. And hopefully, the community can heal from that. To get it out. Say this really happened in our community. Instead of hearsay.
The territorial government says it is willing to work with Indigenous leaders to get to the truth.
The more we talk, the more we heal. And the more we heal, the better people we become. And I believe we're going to get there one day. The Native people are very strong.
And that strength is what keeps Wilfred Simon patiently waiting for answers. Juanita Taylor, CBC News, Fort Resolution, Northwest Territories.
A pedestrian is dead after being struck by a driver on the 403 in Mississauga last night. OPP say it happened around 10:20 p.m. The westbound lanes of the highway just west of Huron-Ontario Street was the scene. Police say a man was hit and that his body was found off to the side of the road. The driver of the vehicle that hit him stayed on scene. No further details of the victim were released. Police are asking anyone with dashcam footage to contact the OPP's Mississauga detachment.
All along the Don Valley are ecosystems and conservation areas there to protect them. Also along the Don Valley is big industry, and sometimes those things don't get along.
We started with small groups of volunteers cleaning up parts of the Don where we saw excessive spill and dumping of waste. People don't know about the consequences of this kind of behavior and this kind of impact in the valley.
I'm Ali Chiasson. Coming up, we'll have more on a group trying to make them coexist.
The mayor announcing a new supportive housing project is being built in Parkdale.
And it is a high-quality prefabricated building that will provide permanent supportive housing on what is now a parking lot owned by UHN. And I think most people would say, you know, given the challenges we face, that's a good thing to do.
The proposed 4-story modular building will house approximately 51 individuals who are getting off the streets or at risk of homelessness. It will focus on seniors, women, Indigenous, and racialized people. The city says the homes should be ready for occupancy by next spring. The mayor adding this is the first supportive housing development as part of the city's partnership with a number of local agencies. It will have a number of health and social services available right on site. Part of the building, or the funding for the building, is coming from the federal government's Rapid Housing Initiative. The Don Valley is an oasis in the heart of our city, but a local group says nearby industry and residential buildings are threatening it. They point to a recent sand and gravel spill that killed a number of trees. Alicia San has more.
3 years ago, we started with small groups of volunteers cleaning up parts of the Don where we saw excessive spill and dumping of waste. We're also in a pocket outside of the normal trails where people don't notice if there is illegal dumping.
That pocket is the Charles Soriol Conservation Area. Environmental group Don't Mess with the Don took a walk through here recently and spotted this, heaps of sand spilling into the ravine.
A lot of the trees have died as a result of this spill.
It's not uncommon either.
This site here is a little different because it's sand and gravel, but just a little bit further north of here, it's a cash and carry, it's plastics. It's high rises as well, and it's poor property management practices.
So while they're a group of volunteers that cleans up mess, they don't take mess, if you know what I mean.
People don't know about the consequences of this kind of behavior and this kind of impact in the valley.
They report it to the city. They report it to the councillor.
We're not joking around. There's not going to be a soft approach to this.
Councillor Brad Bradford sent conservation authorities yesterday to talk to the company responsible for dumping the gravel in the conservation area, something that could warrant a hefty fine. This time they were given 30 days to remove it while they investigate.
Is it a fine? Is it enforcement? Is it education? Just really understanding what's going on and then, taking steps to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Today, the company was already out cleaning it all up, which goes to show you don't mess with the Don. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
The road to the 2021 Juno Awards has been anything but ordinary. Today, the opening night awards are going ahead for the first time. And Sunday, the Juno Awards will be broadcast live from various locations across the city. I'm Jessica Ng, and I'll speak to some of the major players about what you can expect for the 50th anniversary of Canada's big night in music.
The backlog of permanent residents waiting to take their Canadian citizenship test is growing day by day, leaving many frustrated not just by the delay, but by the lack of updates and timeline. Kelly Yoon explains.
Actually, I'm getting worried more and more.
Almost 2 years since applying to become a Canadian citizen, Saida Umar is still waiting to take her citizenship test. She works as a quality engineer for a car company in Woodstock, a job that requires travel outside the country. The delay has been preventing that.
My colleagues are volunteering and stepping up in my place to do my work. So I cannot do this every year. I cannot lose these opportunities. I cannot leave the projects that I am responsible for just because I'm not a Canadian citizen and because only a test is holding me back.
In terms of backlog, is continuously growing.
Asan Umar is the head of the group Advocates for Citizenship Test. He says the delays have impacted many applicants' job prospects and study opportunities and prevented some from visiting ailing family members abroad.
Over 100,000 Canadian residents who work, study, go to school, and call Canada basically their permanent home are not able to join the Canadian family because of 20 multiple choice questions.
The group lodged an access to information request that reveals the backlog of permanent residents ready to take a citizenship test grew from 87,566 people in September 2020 to well over 102,000 by January of this year. The vast majority had been waiting for more than 13 months. The typical time frame is 12 months. After canceling testing last March due to the pandemic, the IRCC resumed testing in November, shifting them online. It said it sent out nearly 66,000 online test invitations by the end of April, with more than 43,000 people having completed them. But Hassan says those rates are far from enough to make up for the backlog.
Files are coming at pre-COVID level, and you're taking the test at pre-COVID level. Okay, but you have a big backlog in between. Who's going to handle that backlog? So it means that some short-term, aggressive, and deliberate strategy needs to be implemented to first handle that backlog before streamlining into normal mode.
In a public letter to Immigration Minister Marco Mendicino this week, signed by more than 100 citizenship applicants, the group requests IRCC clear all applications that have been in process for more than 18 months within the next 90 days. The minister's office did not respond to our request for comment by deadline, though he did have this to say at a recent press conference.
Keep the faith. More digital testing and citizenship ceremonies are coming to you.
Like, how long do I need to be patient? Like, at least if I know by December or September, I would be able to calm my management. I would be able to calm myself.
People feel like being hostage to a system that doesn't have a timeline, that doesn't have an predictability.
Hassan says the group is considering holding another rally when the province opens up if Ottawa does not fulfill their requests.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took questions today at a seminar held at Ryerson University. During it, he was asked about his relationship with Doug Ford during the pandemic and the Premier's criticism that Trudeau hasn't brought in enough restrictions at our borders.
I'm not going to pick a fight with him at this point. I don't think anyone wants to see people fighting during COVID. They want to see us focused on getting through it. But I will point out that we did shut down the borders. We shut them down over a year ago to everyone but Canadians coming home and a small category of essential workers. We brought in extremely strong measures that limited importation to a very, very serious level. And a few weeks ago, in sitting down at a First Minister's meeting, Doug said to me, you've got to reduce the number of people coming into Ontario. I said, okay. 30,000 plus international students, including, I'm sure, a whole bunch of people watching this webcast at Ryerson, have come in to Ontario over the past number of months. Now, I know this because you asked us to let them in. You said that you were confident because we set up a program where universities and colleges could set up a protocol and a quarantine process that would control any importation and spread. But Doug, if you want us to suspend international students, just tell me, send us an official note and we'll do that. If you want us to suspend international travelers, if you want us to do any more, we will do that. Just tell me what you want to do. And that was like 4 weeks ago that he said to me, okay, I want you to suspend international students. I said, okay, you're gonna be getting calls from university students, university presidents, but okay, you tell me that, fine. I'll follow up with you tomorrow and you just send me the note. And he never did. And he never followed up with that request or any other request for us to actually reduce the numbers of people coming into Ontario. Now, remember, we have 4 international airports across the country. They've all been accepting people, and in Quebec, in BC, and even in Alberta, where they did have a serious spike in the third wave, they weren't blaming it on international travel. Now, maybe Ontario is different, but I think there is an awful lot of politics being played there, and I think it's unfortunate. But I also know that a lot of people, particularly Ontarians who've been watching closely this Premier, will be able to see through that.
Tonight, the Juno Opening Night Awards take center stage ahead of the actual awards ceremony happening Sunday night right here on CBC television. Despite pandemic restrictions, organizers say they've tried to bring the spirit of live music to the stream festivities. Jessica Ng has more on the 50th anniversary celebration.
50 years of the Junos, but how to celebrate in a pandemic.
we've invited a number of icons to come back and be part of the Juno Awards. People like Shania Twain, Gordon Lightfoot, Jim Cuddy.
And the tragically hip, without frontman Gord Downie, the iconic band's first televised performance since Downie's death in 2017.
It was just trying to figure out who was the right person, because you can't replace Gord Downie. That's just not going to happen. But Leslie Feist had actually gone on tour with the band.
Lila Bialy performed in and hosted the Juno Jazz Session this week, part of a slew of streamed concerts.
Everybody had to stagger their arrival time. We each had our own space that we were occupying on stage, plexiglass surrounding us.
She's also nominated for Vocal Jazz Album of the Year and says the showcase was hyper-local.
What was it like to be back in a studio, back in a concert experience, even without the live audience?
Exciting, but also, if I'm honest, Jessica, a little poignant, because we're not fully there yet, right?
There should be a red carpet right here in Maple Leaf Square. That was the plan when Toronto was announced as the host city for the 2021 Juno Awards nearly 2 years ago. Organizers wanted to have a huge show in the Scotiabank Arena before the pandemic hit.
It's obviously not what we envisioned for our original ideas of what the 50th was going to be, but we really felt it was important for us to move forward.
The first ever Juno Opening Night Awards are being streamed this evening. Normally, it would be an industry-only event.
And so we had to find another way to make sure we recognize all of these artists. We actually surprisingly had the most amount of submissions in our history this year.
Reed says they normally get between 2,000 to 2,500 artist submissions. This year, it was over 3,000.
We're seeing it across really all of our different genres of music. So many people are shooting for the stars and succeeding at doing it.
The Juno Awards ceremony will broadcast live Sunday, keeping the spirit of live music right here in Canada. Jessica Ng, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette joins us now to preview a possibly record-breaking weekend, Colette.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at, Dwight. Tomorrow, the record is actually 30 degrees, and I'm forecasting above that. It's a record that's been holding since 1940, so it's been around a while. Doesn't mean we can't snap that one, so that's for Pearson. The heat warnings, we've been talking about this throughout the show, that they've been issued, so just know that those are there. Likely they're going to linger into the beginning of next week. And it's not just the heat that we're experiencing in these high dew points, so that stickiness of the air. It's the fact that there's not rain in the forecast, so the air doesn't feel dry, but it's dry in the sense of getting any precipitation. Like I said, you know, into next week, probably this isn't going to break until we get to about Wednesday, Thursday, all right? I wanted to give you this reminder, too, just how quickly a car heats up when we're talking about weather like this. In fact, this is just when your outside air temperature is in the upper 20s, very rapidly, very dangerous. So obviously we're not leaving kids or young children, toddlers in the car, but also your pets. You just can't leave them, not even for a moment to go do something. It just can't happen. And by the way, if you're starting to feel unwell, like maybe you are experiencing some heat exhaustion, these are some of the symptoms: dizziness, the rapid heartbeat, you get a headache, some people get a stomach ache or feeling a little bit faint. So take it easy and get lots of water. Our current temperature 27. We've got a humidex of 31. We're going to be approaching 40. A few little pop-ups. These are winding down, but still near the lakeshore there, towards Pickering, through that region, and further east, Port Hope. You still could get a little bit of precipitation coming on through there. Otherwise, dry, sunny conditions, not just Saturday into Sunday as well. And this is why this is going to be quite the heat wave we're looking at. Check out those temperatures and check out those humidex values, Dwight.
Wow. Thanks, Colette.
That's a big wow. You're welcome.
Canada's unemployment rate moved up a notch last month. Stats Canada reports the economy shed 68,000 jobs in May, pushing the jobless rate to 8.2%, up from 8.1%. Ongoing COVID-19 restrictions and shutdowns are seen as the main cause, but nonetheless, economists expect things will improve over the coming months. Peter Armstrong explains.
These numbers paint the picture of a sputtering economy. But for the first time in a long time, we have reason to believe that sputtering engine is about to catch and finally roar to life. Just look at where the worst job losses were concentrated: Ontario and Nova Scotia, the two provinces hardest hit by new restrictions. And as those restrictions ease, jobs should bounce back pretty quickly. Remember, we added more than 560,000 jobs in February and March on what was at the time a fairly limited reopening. But there has been real damage, and only once the economy is back up and running will we be able to see what damage will last long term. This has been one of the most volatile, most uncertain years on record. And as restrictions lift, that volatility doesn't just disappear, it shifts.
Now the big source of uncertainty for employers is what happens, how do we bring people back? Are we able to bring people back, especially in those sectors that have been locked down for so long?
And it's not just sectors like travel or retail, of course. Participation rates, it's the number of people who are out actively looking for a job, those are also down. And they're especially down among women and among people of color. And sure, the economy is starting to creak open again, but schools remain closed in some areas, meaning parents simply can't go back to work in some cases. The most common job in Canada is in retail sales, and shops are reopening. But how many of those workers have moved or have retrained or found something else? Employers are already indicating they're having a hard time finding workers, and that labor crunch will only get worse as jobs bounce back. So in a way, this is a month of transitions, away from sharp job losses and toward a huge swing in hiring. But it will remain a volatile and uncertain time as those long-term impacts of the pandemic remain. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX closed up nearly 88 points. The Dow closed up 179 points, and our dollar traded at 82.75 cents US. We will be right back. When his son fell and fractured his arm, this Brampton father decided to use his expertise to help. Hargadeep Singh uses 3D printers at his workplace and printed a cast that he thinks is better than the traditional ones. Talia Ricci has the story.
But he wanted to be a superhero, try to jump off a chair.
But 3-year-old Anmol Singh ended up in Emerge with a fractured arm instead.
The doctor said, it's about a 7 days waiting period before we can book him back into fracture clinic. We said, okay, he's on a temporary sling. Can we make his experience better?
Singh wanted to create a 3D printed cast. Since he works in this space, he tapped into his professional network across the globe for help. The end result was a lightweight, waterproof, 3D printed cast made just for him.
My wife had a really interesting idea. She said, how about I reach out to my family and friends, get them to send some personalized stickers and messages, kind of like what you do with a Sharpie. And then he really likes Paw Patrol, so then he said, Papa, I want Paw Patrol, because he kept on pointing to that sticker. So I made him another one, so in the future, if he wants to switch it around or if we clean him up, he has a couple different options that he can match up with. Over the head.
And while the 3-year-old seems to be fairly comfortable, his cast got the seal of approval from his doctor too.
I was impressed just with the model and the printing. It was really nice, essentially. Definitely it's useful, and I think it's ultimately will be the future of casting. When that future comes, though, that's the question. I think it took several hours to print the cast. In general, to put a cast on your arm, it takes about 5 minutes. So that's what they're going to be competing against.
But this dad seems up for the challenge.
We all have, our cell phones in our pockets, but everybody wants a personal cover. So why should a brace be limited to, a standard old brace?
Anmol is expected to recover in a couple of weeks, but will be avoiding jumping off chairs for the foreseeable future. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
He is a cutie, Colette, but look, on a weekend like this with the holes in there, right, instead of that heavy cast we usually wear, it'd come in handy this weekend for that little guy.
Oh, yeah. Innovation. I love it. We know how, if you've ever had one, you can really start sweating in there and then they don't smell so good. So, yes, that's a wonderful story there. And the story of our weather, we know there's a heat warning that is in place. OK, it's going to be for the weekend, but it may well get extended. Not just the temperatures you have to think about, but the humidex values, too, there, Dwight.
We may be talking about some records on Monday. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That's it for us tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll see you back here on Monday. Stay safe and have a great weekend, everybody.